Hello everybody, hope you're doing well and thanks for joining us for another video, where today we'll be discussing flat earthers' claims that a compass proves the earth is flat.
So, the compass only recognizes north.
On the flat earth, we have the center, which is the magnetic north, right? Compasses only work on a flat earth.
A compass only functions properly on a flat surface to differentiate between north, east, south and west.
This one seems to be getting a lot of traction recently amongst flat earthers who argue that compasses couldn't possibly work on a globe and can only work on a flat earth.
Compasses only work on a level plane.
Magnetic compasses are navigation tools with directional markings that use a freely spinning, magnetized needle that aligns with Earth's magnetic field and points to magnetic north. A bit of critical thought reveals these to be impossible and nonsensical instruments for use on a globe Earth.
Or arguing that northeast, south and west themselves are horizontal directions.
Silly little arguments like north and south, for example. Just defining that to people. In all of the stuff we say to you, we've got to point out that that's a 2D translation, north, south, east, west. And explain why.
But once you've got it, you know, your hand's flat and it's parallel to the earth that you're navigating, and you've got your direction straight ahead, horizontally in north, south, east or west.
Talking about north, south, east, west.
Well, you can't have north, south, east or west on a globe, Tardkin.
In fact, some flat earthers will just use that claim as a deflection to avoid addressing aspects that don't work on a flat earth.
So I just posted an image where your audience can't see the ones that you're conning. And the moon is lit, and the sun is hovering in a bright area, but the moon is in the darkness. How does the moon get lit?
What direction is it?
In this example, it's well, every direction is south, right? So I'm going to say south.
South's flat. It's azimuth. It's horizontal. South's
yeah. How does the south moon in the azimuth horizontal area? How does it stay lit?
Maybe chat skanking through the answer that you've just put something to me about the moon. Its direction.
Answer the question, pussy.
Utilizing azimuth, something that you can't use on a globe.
Are the southern circles bigger
South is flat
than the biggest of the equator? What size are the southern circles?
South is flat. South is a flat direction.
And what size of the latitudes there?
South is a flat Earth directionality. It's called azimuth. It's horizontal. It's only a flat Earth measurement.
So rather than trying to explain how things work in the south on a flat earth, because they know they can't, they instead just go, you said south, and that's a flat direction because of compasses, therefore the earth is flat, so let's move on. But we can rather easily debunk this notion that these directions are horizontal directions by the fact that there is more than one kind of compass. Now, a lot of flat earthers claim their source for a magnetic north is located at the North Pole and that there is no actual South Pole.
North always points to the center, aka the North Pole. How could the compass point south if south is down?
Flat earth map, and I have a neodymium magnet. We'll call that Mount Meru. And I have my compass plane boat, whatever it is, and that needle is pointing towards the center.
And the same on the south.
The south you get, that's if you're on a ball, but there is no South Pole. Though the compass works is we have a North Pole. All compasses point to the north. There is no South Pole. If we lived on a ball, compasses would point towards, if you're below the equator, they would point to the ground. They wouldn't point towards the equator, right? So we have a North Pole, but there is no South Pole. So if the North Pole is the center of the lake, where is the South Pole? Well, the truth is there is no South Pole.
So there is no South Pole.
No, there is no South Pole, but you can claim
wait, let me stop you there, because we're short for time. Why then in the South Pole can you also see circumpolar stars?
It's the optics of the sky, and I can't show you here because easily. If he went south, if he kept going south from the alleged North Pole, South Pole, he should have ended up in Australia.
Well, there's no South Pole, right? Isn't that what you're also saying?
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
This is the North Pole here.
Okay, yeah.
And there is no South Pole.
Problem with that claim right off the bat is the magnetic North Pole is not at the actual North Pole. Hence why you have a true north and a magnetic north. True north is where you reach the North Pole based on a map. the location where the stars would appear to rotate directly overhead. Now, if the source of the magnetic field was at the North Pole, then you could start somewhere at, say, 0 degrees longitude at the Greenwich Observatory, take a compass, and just walk in whatever it tells you is north, and you would be traveling perfectly along the 0 degrees longitude line, and eventually you would arrive at the geographic North Pole. However, the magnetic North Pole moves around, and it's currently located in the Arctic Ocean near northern Canada. The difference between true north and magnetic north is known as magnetic declination. The amount of declination varies depending on your location and is something that you actually have to account for when you're trying to guide yourself using a compass and a map through what is known as left add right subtract rule. Basically, for most places on Earth, the north-seeking needle of a compass does not actually point to the geographic North Pole. I mean, that alone causes a big problem for flat Earth. The globe's magnetic field is caused by the molten iron outer core moving around, along with Earth's rotation combining to basically act like an electrical generator that creates a large magnetic field, a mechanism called geodynamo. And these movements are the reason the magnetic poles move around. They move quite significantly as well. The magnetic North Pole has been tracked regularly over the past 400 years and has moved several hundred miles. The magnetic South Pole isn't actually in Antarctica, it's out in the Antarctic Ocean. But what would cause the magnetic fields to move that much on a flat Earth that's claimed to be completely stationary? There's also then the problem with Flat Earth Dave's constant claims that there's no actual South Pole.
And the same on the South.
The south you get, that's if you're on a ball, but there is no South Pole.
Which is that all magnets have both a north and a south. Even the neodymium magnets that he is using here has 2 poles to it. A magnet with only one pole would be a monopole magnet, which are purely hypothetical particles that have never been proven to exist. Researchers at the Large Hadron Collider are currently trying to see if they can discover them. So the Earth has 2 magnetic poles. But then we have the argument that north and south are horizontal rather than, say, up and down.
If compass needles were really drawn to the north pole of a globe, the opposing south needle would actually be pointing up and off into outer space.
Such as laid out in the book Welcome to Flat Earth by Quantum Earaker and Adam Meakin, where they state, quote, "Think of a compass. It is a needle balanced to swing freely, aligning with the magnetic field, but its readout assumes you're holding it level, parallel to a flat Earth. If you tilt it, it no longer works because the ground or sea beneath the compass is a horizontal baseline, and magnetic north is a straight line bearing across that plane, like an arrow drawn on a map. Compass directions are 2-dimensional with respect to a flat plane. These directions, northeast, south and west, and all subdivisions, exist solely within this horizontal 2-dimensional layout. There's no mention of an upward or downward component, no third axis like height or depth, because the compass's purpose is to guide a ship's course across a flat surface, typically the sea. This alignment happens on a horizontal plane parallel to the Earth's surface, and not in a vertical dimension. The needle does not tilt upward towards the sky or downward towards the sea to indicate altitude. It is constrained to a 2-dimensional swing." End quote. Though they then cite Nathaniel Bowditch's book, The New American Practical Navigator, as a reference, the book which on page 74 states, quote, "The Earth is not a perfect globe or a sphere, it is a little flattened at the poles, being nearly the figure of an oblate spheroid, the equatorial diameter being about 34 miles longer than the polar, but since this difference bears but a small comparison to the whole diameter, we may, for all practical purposes of navigation, consider the Earth as a perfect sphere." End quote. Oops. Well, either way, they're claiming the needles point horizontal, therefore the Earth is flat. Now, a compass needle doesn't directly point to, say, the magnetic North Pole because it doesn't know where the North Pole is. The needle is simply aligning with the direction of the magnetic field lines that flow between the poles. On a globe, the magnetic field lines run something like this. which would mean near the equator the lines are running at a fairly consistent height above Earth's surface, whereas at the magnetic poles the field lines would be travelling essentially straight down to the ground. And at locations in between these field lines they would be angled by various amounts depending on location. So, flat earthers argue that because the needles of a compass don't point towards the ground and instead they point horizontal, then the magnetic field lines are travelling horizontal, therefore the Earth is flat. Except here is where their problem lies, because the needles of a compass do point down. At least they would if manufacturers didn't account for it. And this is where the different types of compasses come into play. So if the field lines were travelling down into the ground, the needle will tilt to align with them. However, this would cause a problem that moving further away from the equator, the tilt would become steeper and steeper until you reach a point where the needle tilts so much that it scrapes against the compass housing, which would then affect your readings. A problem which compasses do actually have, which is why manufacturers add weights to the needle to balance out the tilt. That's the reason needles stay roughly horizontal, because they're weighted to counteract the tilt, not because the magnetic field is horizontal. For compasses in the northern hemisphere, the north-seeking needle is being dragged down, so manufacturers put ballast on the south-seeking needle to counter it out. But then if you were to take that compass to the southern hemisphere, the north-seeking needle would naturally start trying to tilt upwards because that's the direction of the magnetic field lines, so ballast on the south-seeking needle would actually make the tilt worse. Instead, the ballast needs to be on the north-seeking needle to stop it rising up, which is why you can buy southern hemisphere compasses and northern hemisphere compasses, and why you shouldn't take a compass designed for one hemisphere into the opposing hemisphere because the drag would be even worse. If the Earth were flat and the magnetic field lines were all horizontal, you wouldn't need two different types of compasses depending on where you were in the world. And it's why compasses get more inaccurate as you near the magnetic poles, because the field lines are sitting at very steep angles, which makes it harder for the compass needle to align with it. Or you can then buy a global compass, which rather than magnetizing the actual needles, which is what causes the needles to dip, the compass has a magnet in the middle that aligns to the magnetic field, and the needle is attached to it, but on a pivot that allows the needle to stay balanced wherever you take it. But then there is also another type of compass that shows, for most people, north and south are actually at an angle and not horizontal, and that is an inclination compass, more commonly known as a dip circle or a dip needle. This is an instrument which you set up like a typical compass, with the needle and plate sitting horizontal so that you can aim the thing north-south. But then the whole plate can rotate 90 degrees to allow the needle to pivot vertically. Now, if the magnetic field was running horizontal, and so north and south were thus horizontal, then turning the dip circle 90 degrees wouldn't do anything. The needles would still be pointing horizontal. However, whilst that is what they do for people on the equator, in reality for everywhere else on Earth, the needles will typically dip to align with the magnetic field. In the northern hemisphere, the north-seeking needle dips down. And in the southern hemisphere, the north-seeking needle tilts up and the south-seeking needle dips down. MC Toon actually tested this when we were in Punta Arenas, Chile. He set up a dip circle, aiming south, and the south needle dipped down by around 50 degrees.
If we lived on a ball, compasses would point towards, if you're below the equator, they would point to the ground. They wouldn't point towards the equator.
If compass needles were really drawn to the north pole of a globe, the opposing south needle would actually be pointing up and off into outer space.
If you were to set one of those up at the magnetic poles, the needle then would be sitting basically vertical. And the only reason that most compasses don't show that is because they're counterbalanced to avoid it. If you were to take a northern hemisphere compass to the southern hemisphere, you'd get drag if you were holding the compass horizontal. But if you were to then tilt the north end up towards the sky, it would work fine. But I love the flat earth idea that north and south have to be horizontal and couldn't possibly be curving down, because their own concepts debunk that argument, because what direction is east or west? If north and south can't be curving downwards, then surely east and west can't be curving sideways. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already done so, then please do consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.